So the IMDb synopsis for 1969's Kes simply reads, a working class English boy spends his free time caring for and training his pet kestrel. Now that admittedly doesn't sound like the most enticing prospect for your next movie night, but Ken Loach's low budget, almost documentary like glimpse of life in the north of England is both a fascinating time capsule and a punishing look at the prospects of working class youngsters growing up in soon to be doomed Yorkshire mining towns. So British distributors of the time had very little hope for its success, but the public embraced it when it was released in the spring of 1970, and now it's considered one of the greatest British films of all time. So let's take a look.
Casper! What do you think you're doing? Get down, lad! Why you changed?
No, yes, sir.
Casper, you make me sick. Every lesson it's the same old story. Please, sir, I've no kit, sir. Every lesson for the past 4 years. You've begged and borrowed and skived and scrounged.
So based on the Barry Hines 1968 book, A Kestrel for a Knave, Kes sees young South Yorkshire lad Billy Casper, played by newcomer David Bradley, just trying to survive his final year at school during a time when the kind of discipline and regimentation used would cause absolute outrage to kids these days. Billy's life's a grey and seemingly miserable one. He's bullied by the children, teachers, and especially his bitter older brother Judd. Things are bleak, but soon Billy finds a kestrel's nest and takes it upon himself to capture and train a young bird. And this opens up a world of interest and enthusiasm in the boy that he's never been able to find at school or at home. So Kes was shot on location around Barnsley, South Yorkshire, and populated with mostly non-actors. It has a realism and a matter-of-factness that not only draw you into the film, but also make the moments of bird-flying elation and ultimately heartbreaking tragedy hit very hard. Now, of course, Billy's newfound hobby is not well received by his family and seen just as a silly and childish daydream, certainly by a society expecting him to follow in his brother's footsteps and go into the pits or into some other dead-end job. A great classroom scene where he gets to tell his classmates about training the bird shows an outpouring of excitement and enthusiasm that spreads across the rest of the class, including his teacher, Mr. Farthing, who recognises that glimmer of hope in Billy and encourages him.
But most exciting thing when I flew free first time, sir.
Do you want to hear about that? Aye, come on.
I walked back up into Midlock Field and called her again, and she came just as good as first time, straight onto the glove and grabbing for mate. Well, that was it, sir. I trained her, sir, and that's all I could do.
Now, the problem is, of course, that the kestrel becomes Billy's only slither of joy and hope, and as such, tragedy's incoming. Now, I won't spoil anything in too much detail here, of course. So Kes was the second feature film by British director Ken Loach, who already had the equally devastating TV play Cathy Come Home and feature film Poor Cow under his belt. Now, Ken Loach had become one of the most politically charged and socially minded filmmakers around, a gift that was also a curse, as his career would be plagued by poor funding and distribution. His 1984 documentary on the miners' strike was commissioned by Channel 4 and then immediately banned. Now, Kes is probably, for me, Loach's finest work. Barry Hines' story gives him a perfect platform to comment on social and economic issues like education, British industry and employment as a whole. Its image of public school life in the late 60s is bleak enough to be shocking to modern audiences, highlighting a very outdated education system that literally sorted children into specific schools based on academic ability, essentially fueling a divide in prospect and ultimately class at a very early age.
Casper, where the devil have you been?
Nowhere, sir.
Nowhere? Who are you, the invisible man?
I felt sick, sir, so I went to the toilets.
What happened? Did you drop down, eh? I've had prefects looking all over the school for you.
Well, I went out then, sir, for a breath of fresh air.
And where are you going now?
Employment officer.
Field interview? Well, get off then, lad. And God help your future employer.
And circumstances like this really fuel Billy's enthusiasm and love for his newfound pet. I think he sees some form of simplicity and freedom within the bird that he doesn't have, even though they're both essentially caged animals. Only one of them gets to spread its wings both metaphorically and literally. Now, it's not all doom and gloom, of course. One of my favourite scenes in Kes has absolutely nothing to do with birds of prey. It's a PE lesson in which Brian Glover's teacher, Mr. Sugden, reenacts a football match between Manchester United and Tottenham Hotspur. The teacher far more interested in living out his own fantasy than actually engaging or teaching his students.
Quickly, Casper. I've never seen such slack work in my life. I've never seen such slack work in my life.
What's that for, sir?
Slack work, lad, slack work. Take that ball at the field, Parker.
It's full of brilliant little moments, like Glover's dive in the penalty area and him basically assaulting anyone in his way.
Cross the ball. And John goes through. Oh,
So you can't talk about Kes without talking about David Bradley. I think he was about 16 or 17 when he landed this lead role, his first incidentally, after an open audition where literally thousands of school children were seen. It's a casting masterstroke because Bradley's performance is so realistic it's often hard to believe you're not watching a fly-on-the-wall documentary. And props again to Ken Loach because he dispenses the myth here of never working with children or animals, and actually coaxes amazing work out of Bradley and the three kestrels that play the titular bird. Now, the young Bradley worked closely with the birds and their trainer, and I don't think there's a second in the film that doesn't look like he's completely comfortable and at home handling them in the film's impressive flying scenes. Now, the rest of the cast here is also great. I think it's 99% amateurs, with only the late Colin Welland being a professional actor. Sheffield actor Brian Glover's PE teacher role was his first credited acting film role. Prior to that, he actually was a teacher. The guy playing the headmaster at the school is actually the headmaster of that school. So suffice to say, its authenticity is one of the film's great accomplishments. So authentic, in fact, that the film's executives and distributors feared that the Yorkshire accents in the film would baffle anyone outside of the north of England.
See now, Billy?
Aye, he's on here with me.
Sound a bit funny, so stick the ear down there, old pal. And flush it. That's seen him.
I would tell me if I had.
And therefore they gave it a very limited release. That's a reason why the film's IMDb page states it as being released in 1969, despite it not seeing a full release until the spring of 1970. Now, Kes also captures Britain at a very interesting time. Coal mining at the time was already in decline, certainly throughout the 50s and 60s. Harold Wilson's Labour Party was about to be ousted by Edward Heath in what would be a short-lived Conservative reign between 1970 and 1974, a term that actually turned into a battle when the miners went on strike for the first time in 46 years. This led to the now infamous 3-day working week. And the reason for me dipping my toes into Britain's political history is that the mining industry does loom large in this film, with several scenes featuring an industrial backdrop, huge mining facilities ominously looming over green countryside. A pivotal scene with a careers officer sees our young protagonist immediately pigeonholed and ushered towards a life in the mines, a life that was slowly becoming obsolete at that time.
Well, if nothing I've mentioned so far appeals to you, and if you can stand a hard day's work and you don't mind getting dirty, there are good opportunities in mining.
I'm not going down, Pete.
Oh, don't be put off by what you've heard. Conditions have improved tremendously.
Although he's bullied and downtrodden, I like that Billy Casper's no saint. We still see him stealing, being rude to his teachers. He's still just an ordinary kid in an ordinary school. And I like that Kes proves that sometimes the greatest stories can sometimes just be about ordinary life. Go check it out.